And we're live again. Hello, everyone. Hello, Max. Welcome. And
Hi, thank you.
today my second guest is Mr. Max Zoulek, and he is a certified facilitator. Now you're living in Sweden, right?
We're based
Oh,
here, sort of, and we might move soon again, so we'll see.
yeah. And yeah, he travels around the world and he facilitates classes, and he's quite a global person for those of you who don't know. And today we're here to talk about his perspective about presumptive and reactive realities in terms of entities and entity awareness and everything involved with entities. I would like to ask you, Max, what is the first thing that comes to your mind with regards to presumptive and need of reactive realities in the subject of entities?
Well, I would say, I mean, how many presumptions do people have about spirits,
Hmm.
entities, ghosts, death, all of the stuff, you know? So, first of all, can we destroy and uncreate all of those?
Yes, please.
Right, wrong, good, bad, bad, buckle, nine shorts, boys, perverts, and beyonds. We are given so many false points of views from movies and from
Hmm.
religion primarily. That's where a lot of like spirit education stems from, and most of it is
Yeah.
incorrect. Very rarely do we come across something that's actually true, like an element, a piece that's true about the spirit world when it comes from movies or religion. A lot of it is really used. I mean, movies are all about drama and
Hmm.
entertainment through, you know, drama and upset and scary and getting people's emotions going and, you know, all that sort of thing. That's, I mean, literally in film story writing and all of that, they're always talking about how to connect with people's emotions and how to move people's emotions. And I think that's a really incorrect perspective, because it's not, dealing with spirits is not an emotional thing. Emotions
Yeah.
is what people put on top of it to not really be with
Hmm.
spirits and be themselves in that arena. So a lot of presumptive realities come from movies and religion and so forth. So I would
Hmm.
really suggest to you guys, when you come across something to do with spirits, like ask yourself, is this response a presumptive a reaction to a presumptive reality that I've bought from somewhere or from someone,
Hmm. Hmm.
rather than literally just the awareness. When you're truly present, it's completely different than having any presumptions or having a reactive reality to something.
Hmm. I'm
Yeah.
wondering your personal experience before talk to the entities, maybe before Shannon, were you aware of the capacity that you had with entities and in which ways you were maybe shutting it off, where things have started changing for you?
Yeah. I never acknowledged that I was aware of the spirit world before then. And it actually took me a few classes with Shannon to realize that, to really get for myself that I was aware of entities. Because I took my first talk to the entities classes because I was interested in Shannon, not because I thought I was entity aware. that's
Good
that's
excuse
the
to.
that's the interesting thing about me in that case. It's probably not an often a case, at least not that they married Shannon, you know.
Uh-huh.
Um, so it was funny. I was actually just doing a Facebook Live beforehand about the intermediate talk to entities class that I've got coming up, and I gave the example of, like, it was the second or the third class. I was riding my bike home or to the Airbnb where we're staying, and I started feeling really heavy, like the wrongness and paranoia and these, what I now know to be entity signs, entity awareness signs. So when I'm aware of entities, there's this very specific psychological profile that sort of comes into my universe that I now know is, I'm aware of entities. But back then, like before then, it was just normal. I thought it was normal because it was always there to some degree. Sometimes it was really heavy duty, then not. And then after this class, when I was on the bike, it was just really came in, and I remembered her in that day saying that these are entity signs, these three things. this paranoia, this real sense of wrongness, and you're like the worst person in the world. And I was like, oh, she was talking about it. Why don't I try like one of the tools? Fancy idea. So I cleared entities, and immediately it was gone. Immediately. And I was like, holy fucking shit, this has never occurred in my whole life, that I chose something, and that this sensation, which was just like, I just thought it was me, and I just thought it was me. It was completely gone. And then that occurred repeatedly, and then I was like, wow, I need to discover what my signs of entity awareness are, because the stuff, my presumptive realities at the time of like movies, the scary, the this and that, and how it shows up, and was completely incorrect. And angels and this and that, like when you're, like I said beforehand, when you're truly present with the spirit world, it's a completely different reality, completely different. And especially when you have the tools to deal with it, it's a completely different reality. And then it really helps you to go beyond presumptive realities and to be way more present with, what's real. And you like, death becomes a whole lot less relevant, because you start recognizing when you're communicating with entities, oh, they're not really dead. They just don't have a body anymore. And you get this incredible experience of diversity, because they have a lot less physical energy like people do to put into projections of what they want to be seen as. They are capable of projecting ways so they can be seen by people, and I don't just mean visually, but perceived. But a lot of people put on a face, right? And I mean, most of us probably do it. I know I do it in certain situations. I'll project what I want people to see me as, and it takes away from that diversity that actually exists. Like if everyone was truly being themselves, you'd really see the difference so much more apparently. And with the spirit world, that is more apparent. So you get to like experience this incredible diversity that you otherwise wouldn't.
Beautiful way of explaining all of that. And actually, talk to the entities. I know in the beginning class and intermediate afterwards, you talk a lot. I have been to a few classes, and you talk more
Yeah.
about this, but there is also a presumption that everyone, an entity awareness is something that is like, if you are aware of them, it is this way that you're aware of. Like you said, signs of my entity awareness. That was like a little sentence, but gives out so much,
Right.
because every one of us are unique. Can you talk
Yeah.
about that?
Well, the other talk entities facilitator that I was doing the Facebook Live with, she had a very extreme version of PCOS, which is like a female reproductive system disorder. She couldn't tolerate hardly any foods. Her body wouldn't keep foods in, basically, as well as a lot of psychological stuff. And when she started using the Talk to the Entities tools, that completely changed, and she has none of those things happening anymore. So you can tell, like, my symptoms were relatively mild compared to that, and they were basically psychological. She had a lot of physical signs of entity awareness as well, but when we started using the same tools and dealing with our entity awareness, those things were completely removed. So it shows up completely different for different people. Some people might just have the awareness and they create a lot more space in their universe. Like for me, it was never a total necessity from my point of view at the time, but it's like completely changed my life anyways. Like I was functioning well at the time, relatively well. But some people, like for Shannon too, have this extreme entity awareness that if they don't handle it and use tools like Talk to the Entities, and Talk to the Entities are just like the easiest tools that I know of, they can either go completely insane. Like the other Talk to Entities facilitator was saying, she'd be in a mental institution because she was basically schizophrenic at the time, or would have been diagnosed as schizophrenic. But now, like, none of that exists in her universe. Shannon, same thing. Like, if she didn't have Gary showing her how to deal with those entities, Gary's her father, who's the founder of Access Consciousness, who was like very supportive in her having that
Mhm.
ability and then showing her how to use that, she would either be dead or in a mental institution as well, but probably more likely dead, because you would not confine Shannon. That just wouldn't work. She'd rather be dead than be confined like that.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of people, I mean, there's so many mental institutions and alcoholics and
Yeah.
substance abusers that what if they did have this possibility and tried the tools and had that support to
Mhm.
discover what different possibility might there be. I'm not saying all of them
Yeah. Yeah.
are have that because they're entity aware, but I do know that a lot of them would have if they chose
Mhm.
to try something different like that, it would be a completely different reality for them.
Yeah, another listener also wrote, I don't
Yeah,
see the name, but if I didn't use the tool, I would die now if I didn't have the
yeah,
talk to the entities tools. Yeah, some for some people it is that intense as Max indicated. And I'm also very grateful for Shannon and Gary Douglas, of course, supporting her in that path. I have done not told to the entities, but entity awareness and entity work before access in different
right.
modalities. But it's the first time in access and through talk to the entities tools that we can be in communion and have them as a contributory factor in our lives as well. Is not something you need to get rid of necessarily.
Yeah,
And can you talk to about that also, because they can create help ease joy with every creation if you are open to it, and it makes your life easier, and if you don't shut off your awareness.
I love that point that you made. Like, because in this reality and a lot of metaphysical stuff, because I did a lot of metaphysical stuff too beforehand,
Yeah.
it's always about getting rid of the entities and
Yeah.
banishing them, and because they're bad and they're a bad influence and you know bad energy and all this sort of stuff. But it's totally not the case. There is like it's such, like I said beforehand, it's such a diverse, like entities is an umbrella term. Underneath that, you have all sorts,
Yeah.
from beings that had bodies like human bodies beforehand, animal bodies, or then you have beings like nature spirits. They have
Mhm.
very different bodies, way more subtle type bodies than what we have. Then you have beings of light. You have demons. They're more like they don't come from this planet. They're from a whole other different planet, and they have like a job, and they're like a worker sort of entity. And with demons, like the scariness that they put across is just a facade, and they work on your judgments. It's not that the demon is bad; they're just doing their job essentially. But if you get to recognize what a demon actually is, and that they're just triggering your judgments, and that's how they minimize you and do their job, you have so much more freedom. So, uh, yeah, it's such a diverse landscape. And when you're not
Basically
just
unconscious.
lumping them.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry. I thought it was cut off a bit. Basically, it's about unconsciousness. It's judgments create unconsciousness, comes out of unconsciousness. So that's where they can find the breeding ground. So
Right.
it's a lot of presumptions that doesn't allow us to work with it, and it's the first time also on that matter with working, being aware and being willing to notice where demons are involved and having the tools. That is completely priceless.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say I probably actually take having these tools for granted to some degree. I'm realizing in this conversation, because as I look back to what my life was like beforehand, and even just psychologically, like
Mhm.
I felt like I was at the effect of so many things constantly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just because I had financial problems, or I had some health problems, or family problems, or whatever it was. A lot of it had to do with just the impact of being aware of entities and never acknowledging it, and never really handling it in a way that works. It's just like, imagine if you were walking around the world and you never acknowledged that people were there, and you were just
Mhm.
constantly just like bumping into them, and then like people would be yelling at you, or some people would be trying to help you, and you're like, ah, no, and you're like just ignoring them, and you were going about your life like that. It's a very similar thing with entities. When you're not acknowledging that you're aware and that they're part of
Yeah.
this whatever life is, um, and then dealing with them in a way that works. So when you deal with people in a way that works, your life becomes a hell of a lot easier,
Mhm.
and in a way that works for you, and incorporates the differences and the requirements that other people have to whatever degree is,
Mhm.
workable.
Thank you. Thank you. And for those like me, maybe, I think Talk to the Entities class was one of the last classes I chose. And I had a huge resistance to it. I was already feeling weird, and not to be presumed weirder by this reality, I was not touching that topic until I took that and saw the capacities, like, and the possibilities and all the awarenesses that I had. As Max said, we have so many presumptions about what entities are, but you can, and there's so much aware. I can talk to the plants, I can talk to the nature spirits, I can talk to consciousness. This is all involved within this communication and communion. Once you resist and react and shut down, you're also shutting down a huge variety of consciousness, not just your capacities. It's
Yeah.
For those of you, if there is any resistance, see if you have a capacity in that area that you are refusing to allow. And that would be my comment. And if you have any other last comments,
Yeah.
Max,
Well,
do.
I think pretty much everyone. It's so funny hearing from so many different people over the years about, I avoided this topic for so long, and then I finally did. Like, basically, if you desire greater, eventually you'll do a talk to the entities class. You'll because it's this area that you just can't really ignore and be like choosing more consciousness. It's sort of like, it's a thing.
Exactly.
Um, and everyone's so different too, and everyone has their own timeline of their choices, and but it's pretty funny.
Yes. Well, do you have any talk to the entities around the world, Max, coming up? Or I can just leave a link
I
of your
Yeah,
access site, I mean, access profile.
I do have a talk to the entities beginning class, which also starts with an intro, but it's in German, because I also
Mm.
facilitate them in German sometimes. So this particular one is online, so it's available anywhere, but it's in German, and that begins next week on
Oh,
Wednesday.
soon.
Very
Cool.
close. And then I have an intermediate class, which is in English, also translated to Hungarian. That will
Mm-hmm.
happen on the 16th, 18th, and 20th of May.
Mm. Okay.
And then, I mean, Shannon has the advanced class too. If anyone's done an intermediate, or they're looking to do an intermediate and want to go to advanced, there's the Turbo Advanced, which is happening in July, live
Yeah.
in Paris, also online, and the
Yeah.
facilitators class. So that's the summit, is like the advanced and facilitators class happens at that time, which is, I'm really looking
Wow.
forward to, because that's always like a pinnacle of the year in terms of like talk to the entities with all the facilitators and stuff. It's really grand.
Amazing. And yeah, I'll post the links for those of you
Thank
who
you.
are interested. And thank you, Max, for talking about this and being a guest here. It was really eye-opening, and a lot of
Brilliant. Thank you
insight
so much for the invitation.
there. Thank you. And see you
Really
somewhere in the
appreciate it.
world. Thank you, everyone watching now or in the future. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.